So when I say I'm from Japan and London, half of the people think I'm joking. So
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm actually serious. Like I was born and raised
right.
in Japan.
Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Takashi from Japan. So today I'm going to interview British man born and raised in Japan. I asked him a lot of questions about Japan, about his identity, the differences between the UK and Japan. Okay, let's get started. Okay, thank you for your time. Actually, we just met in London a few days ago. Now we're in Tokyo.
Yes.
We still jet lagged, but now I'm gonna interview him as a British man born and raised in Japan.
And it's very funny that we were in London together like 5 days ago, I think.
Yeah.
And we came back to Japan like only one day apart, and we're still jet lagged, especially you.
Yeah.
And I took him to a nice pub in Soho, London. Again, actually, because I was on his channel 1 year ago.
Yes.
Again, so it's really nice to be able to.
I interviewed him a year ago about same topic, but I think it was like 4 minutes or something.
Yes.
Like now this time, I'm gonna interview him like deeply, like his background, his identity, and everything. Yeah, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. So I was born and raised in Tokyo, Japan, and my family's been living in Japan for past 3 generations. So that means my all four of my grandparents moved to Japan in the 50s and 60s. So my grandparents on my dad's side, my grandfather is from Australia and my grandmother is from the UK, and my grandparents on my mother's side, they're from New Zealand, and they all moved to Hokkaido, Japan. And so, of course, my parents, they both grew up in Hokkaido, Japan. And I think my dad, he met my mom in Hokkaido. Then they both moved to Tokyo. And I was born here and born and raised. And I went to Japanese school mostly. But I also went to an international school for middle school. But besides that, I only went to public Japanese school. But I also went to college in London. I've been living in London for the past 1 year, but been going back and forth between the UK and Japan since 2018, I think. Yeah, that's me basically.
Okay. First question is, what was it like growing up in Japan as a white man, British man? What was it like?
So first of all, I never felt British at all. I'm only British by law, I say, because I had never lived there until 2018. Because I was in such a Japanese environment, I never felt that different. I knew I wasn't Asian. I knew I wasn't Japanese, but because people around me always accepted me as who I was, who I am, I think I never felt like a foreigner that much, but it was only until I was like 18 that I finally realized that, oh, I'm not Japanese even. Oh, almost. I knew I wasn't Japanese, but I was like, oh shit, I am a foreigner, That kind of struck me. But I loved going to Japanese school actually. I loved it. I love Japanese humor to start with, and I really enjoyed just going to Japanese school. There's so many events happening. There's the kyushoku, like lunch, is so good, so fun. I think I had a really, really good experience. But also going to an international school for middle school was really good and crucial as well because I got to have that international experience and got to get a bit of knowledge what it's like outside Japan. But after that, I just went back to Japanese high school, so I was pretty much very Japanese. But I think I had to relearn English and bring it back to life because I hadn't spoke English for quite a while. So I just had to force myself to use English for work. And so that's when it came back. When I was in sixth grade and first year of middle school, I think I really wanted to become Japanese, like how I look. I really hated how I looked, and I really wanted to look like my friends, basically. And I really hated myself because of that, because I didn't fit in, like look wise. But I think I felt more comfortable being with Japanese people than being with Americans or British or like other international people because I basically grew up with Japanese people, and so that's the very reason why I went back to Japanese school, is that I just felt more comfortable being surrounded by Japanese people because we have the same humor, same mannerisms, just the culture we grew up with is basically the same. But when I went to international school, I think it was too different to me, very different. And people didn't get my jokes, people didn't get what I was talking about because I mostly watch Japanese TV, but they watch American TV. We couldn't connect on a deeper level. But with Japanese people, I was able to connect with them deeply, you know? So I think I never had a problem back then. But as I said before, I think after 18, people don't know your background because I always was surrounded by the same people from the same city, like my local area. People only saw me as a foreigner, and people tell me I'm a foreigner, I'm an outsider. So that's when I started to question who I am. And so that's why I was like, I wanted to connect with my roots. And that's one of the reasons why I moved to the UK as well.
Before you started living in the UK 1 year ago, you used to go to another country like every year or stuff like that.
Actually, I didn't. My family,
Oh right,
they mostly live in Hokkaido.
Right.
The place I went back every summer was Hokkaido. Grandparents lived like 5 minutes down the road from me. They're obviously not Japanese, but it was only until 2017 that I got to visit the UK for the first time. And that's when I got to see my home country for the first time. And that was pretty shocking experience, I would say, because I had this image of the UK in my head, and it was pretty different to that. I mean, I only went to London that time. It was rough, dirty, but at the same time, the diversity was very appealing to me. How people just don't care who you are in a positive way, they just don't care. And I felt accepted, and I just felt so at ease there. Felt this comfort that I had never experienced. I found a new identity in the UK, and I just felt so comfortable. But I was there until COVID hit London. During COVID, I was here, but last year, again, I decided to move to the UK because I think I wanted diversity, that comfort again, and kind of reconnect with the UK again. But it's also very nice to come back to Japan again. I'm only here for 7 weeks, but it's very, very nice.
You felt comfortable in the UK because of the diversity, I guess. You didn't know you're kind of uncomfortable in Japan at the time, or like did you kind of already notice?
I think
I don't know if you're uncomfortable at the time, but
I think I was uncomfortable in a way because I didn't know who I was. I was like, am I British? Am I Japanese? Who am I? I was always asking these questions to myself. And I think I kind of found that in the UK. And I just learned that I just have to be myself. And I just say, I am who I am, and nothing more, nothing less. And so I think UK really taught me how to be myself.
when you say you're from Japan in London in the UK, I guess people are gonna surprised. Like, but like, how do you feel about it? Like, you get used to it, or
So when I say I'm from Japan and London, half of the people think I'm joking. It kind of goes wrong sometimes. They think I'm joking in a very serious situation, but it is a fact that I'm from here. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm actually serious. Like I was born and raised
Right.
in Japan. Some people just stop there and think they're getting into a very sensitive topic. But I personally don't mind those questions, but because it's a fact that I'm from Japan. And so some people ask like other questions, some people just stop there. It really varies. Yeah.
So how do Japanese people see you when you speak Japanese, or when you say you're from Japan to Japanese people? Like, is there any differences, the reaction?
So there is obviously there is a initial surprise, but once I start speaking Japanese, they know I'm from here. They know I'm from Tokyo. Once they get over that, they just treat me like a almost like a local. But some people can't get over the fact that I'm not ethnically Japanese. So that varies as well. Some people think I'm from Tokyo. Some people think I'm this strange foreigner that speaks perfect Japanese. One person can be like, oh, wow, interesting, nice. Or they just don't process what I'm saying and they still think I'm a foreigner after talking to me for like an hour or something. So it really depends.
The way you define yourself, has it changed from when you're a teenager, even like a few years ago before living in the UK? Now you live in the UK, like, is there any differences?
Yeah, I think it's changing every minute almost.
Okay.
Because so when I was growing up, obviously I thought I was a foreigner. I'm a foreigner in Japan. After high school, I said, like, I'm British, but I grew up in Japan. In the UK, I say, I grew up in Japan, I'm from Japan, but I never say I'm Japanese. I I'm not from a Japanese family. My family's not from Japan. So I'm quite hesitant to say I'm Japanese, and I would never say that. Or even saying British Japanese or Japanese British, it doesn't feel comfortable. So I just say my family's originally from the UK, but I was born in Tokyo, Japan. I don't have a Japanese passport. In order to get a Japanese passport, you have to renounce your British passport. But because I already have a Japanese permanent residency, it was like a best deal to just keep my British passport and keep my Japanese permanent residency.
So even though you're born in Japan, you don't get Japanese passport, which is not the case in America, right?
Yeah, I don't plan to become Japanese. Yeah.
Is there any negative aspect of not having Japanese passport as someone born raised in Japan?
Right. So you can't vote, first of all. You can't vote at the city office or somewhere. You get treated more like a foreigner. So you have to go through extra paperwork at the city office. So that's one thing. But other than that, I don't really see any difference. It'll be great if I could just say I'm legally Japanese, but I don't know, maybe I'm selfish. It's very good to have plan B and be able to live in the UK while being able to live in Japan.
How do you see Japan now? Like, like as a country.
Can I give my first impression of Japan when I got back here 2 days ago?
Okay.
I, th- I think it's very peaceful, very clean, and people are very gentle compared to the UK. So that was my initial reaction when I got back here. I always knew that, but it was something I grew up with. So I thought that was the norm. But when I got back here 2 days ago, I was like, oh wow, it's actually really peaceful. I really took it for granted, but I think I can finally really appreciate the country I grew up in. Yeah. I think 98% of the population is Japanese here. You never see diversity except maybe in like central Tokyo, and it's mostly tourists. So I think Japan, they think there's only one answer to one question. And
What does it mean?
so obviously there are so many ways to do something, right? But in Japan, they think doing it this one way that's been done in the country the whole time, that's the only thing you can do. And if you do something else, you're wrong. You're not a perfect person. And also, like in Japan, you always have to be presentable. You always have to be perfect. And I think in the UK, you don't have to be perfect and you don't have to be presentable all the time. It's okay to show your lack of perfection. Work-wise as well, it's very strict here, and you can't go home before your boss or something. There's like so many unseen rules. For me, it's so much easier to not deal with that. And I always felt bad in a way for having different ideas, and yeah, so that's how I see Japan, I guess, yeah.
Are you gonna come back to Japan indefinitely in the future, or you want to live in London like for a while?
I think I'll stay in London for one more year or two, but after that, maybe I might want to be in Japan for the rest of my life, or I might want to go back and forth. But my family's here, my roots are here, so for London, I think I will just be there for like the next 2 years or something. Yeah.
Video its title it's gonna be like British man born raised in Japan, something like that. That's contradiction, right? Like like if you're born raised in Japan, you're Japanese. So the question is, do you consider yourself British or Japanese? How do you define?
I think I see my British passport as a card to play in this man-made world. I don't feel British, I don't feel Japanese, but I know I'm from this country. I know I grew up here, but I also know my roots. I know where my ancestors are from. I'm very proud to be British, and ethnically I'm very proud. I'm very proud that my grandparents moved to Japan 10 years after the war. There was no base for them. They left their country and they started a life here. So I'm very proud of what they did. But so I want to take on that pride as well. I just feel like a person from Tokyo.
Alright. Can I ask your family roots? Like why did your grandparents move to Japan like after World War II,
My grandparents are Protestant missionaries. So they were planting churches mostly in Hokkaido. I think many missionaries were moving to Japan in the 50s, 60s, so they were one of that movement. And my family, interestingly, they just stayed in Japan. And I think many just go back to their own country.
Your parents also stayed, and then you also stayed. We met in London a few days ago, and the way you walked, the way you behaved, everything was different. When I met you at Harajuku Station, like you're a completely different person. Like when I met you in London, when I met you in Harajuku Station in Tokyo. Your behavior, your demeanor, your mannerism is completely different when you're in London and when you're in Japan.
So I grew up doing that. I grew up changing my mannerism, my behavior, depending what language I'm speaking, who I'm with. So I think it's just like a natural thing to me. When I'm in Japan, I behave like a Japanese person. When I'm in the UK, even though just moved to the UK recently, I picked up the mannerism, I picked up the vibe of the city. So I think I try to fit in, but I know people are surprised how much I change. I think in Japan, I always tried not to stand out. My voice gets really little, very small. But in London, I talk louder. I don't care about who's looking at me, blah, blah, blah. Care more about what other people are thinking about me in Japan.
I don't know if you're gonna marry someone, but like if you have kids one day, are you gonna raise them in Japan or in the UK? They're not gonna be fully Japanese by blood, right? Even if you marry a Japanese person, right? Like, what do you think? What's your opinion?
It will be very important for me to tell my kids they will struggle with identity. They will struggle being a minority or not feeling Japanese, not feeling British, or not being able to fully connect with the country they grew up in. But if they do grow up in UK, I think they will be able to feel more British. But I think for Japan, it's very hard to fully feel Japanese if you're not ethnically fully Japanese. So if I do raise my kids in Japan, I'll really have to educate them about identity and how it's like to grow up in Japan as non-Japanese.
You need to, tell them that how they will struggle with their identity. The question is like, do you still struggle with it, or you just went through?
I think I do still struggle a little bit, but I don't know. I feel like I found my identity in the UK. Like, I mean, what is identity, right? But I struggle less than before. I feel like I'm just pretty comfortable with myself now. It took a long time, but I feel like I'm finally on the way to accepting myself, accepting my roots, accepting my upbringing. Yeah, so I think, I don't struggle as much. Yeah.
We talk a lot about your struggle with your identity, but anything you think that is like pros of being like foreigner born raised in Japan? Anything that you wanna mention?
Right. So I really realized this in the UK, but when you're in the UK, you're nobody, right? You're nobody. You're nothing but a white person in London. But when you're in Japan, people do make you feel special, and it's very easy to make an impression. I think that's one good thing about being in Japan is that you do get the attention.
Is there anything you wanna say to my viewers?
Okay, I think your viewers are very, very interested in Japan. It's such a privilege to be able to be brought up in such a interesting country that everybody's interested in. I'm finally realizing how different Japan is.
Yeah, very unique.
Very unique. But what I wanted to say is that I really appreciate the people that are so fascinated by Japan. And deep down, I really, really appreciate this country, like Japan. But obviously, I struggled with the culture and all that. But bottom line, I really, really am thankful that I grew up here.
Okay, so at the end, I'm sure they want to hear your Japanese, so which is your native language. So let's switch to Japanese. 軽く自己紹介してもらっても大丈夫ですか？
はい、
軽く。
僕はイギリス生まれイギリス育ちの、ロンドン出身の日本のことを全く知らない外人ですってね。
お仕事何してますか？言ってなかったそういえば
仕事はタレント俳優みたいな。
それはやっぱりあれですよね。自分のバックグラウンドをうまく、やっぱりレア な部分を使ってる。
そう、バックグラウンドを生かしつつ、もともとの性格も生かしつつ、本当にいい具合で掛け合わさったなって思ってて。
でも普段日本語で話してるから、
そうそうそう。
英語で話すとちょっと逆に違和感あって最初僕は。
そうだよね。でもなんかこう、なんか日本語で喋ってる時の方がやっぱりスムーズに出てくるし、やっぱり日本語の方がなんか自分の耳がもっと受け入れるんだよね。英語じゃなくて日本語を。だからこう、まあ、やっぱり僕は日本で育ったんだなと思うけど。
終わりですね、そろそろ。
いいと思います。
Okay. Thank you so
ありが
much.
とうございました。
Okay, thank you for watching so far. How was it? That was interesting. I would love to interview someone who has interesting background like him. So if you know someone, please let me know. Okay, anyway, thank you for watching. If you like this video, click like button. Please subscribe to my channel. If you have any question you want me to ask people in Japan, please leave the comment too. See you next time.